breaking news that's coming in at this point, and this is from Vietnam. 15 Indians have died. This is as a tourist boat was bringing them from an island quite near Phuoc. They were bringing them back to another location, and that's when the boat seems to have capsized. What we are learning, there were 32 Indian tourists on board, and there were 4 crew members. That's a total of 36 on board that tourist boat, which seemed to be a double-decker tourist boat, often used to ferry tourists, passengers from one island to the other. Phuoc, as we all know, is a very popular island destination, of course, for families as well, with their toddlers, with their kids around. It's a very popular Indian tourist destination as well. And this boat was returning from an island which is very close to Phuoc. In fact, just 10 kilometers away from Phuoc is what we are learning. It is the Hon Me Rut Nogai Island. From where this boat was returning. There are 15 people who have been rescued. There are 15 people, I beg your pardon, that have been killed in this tragedy. 15 Indians have been killed in this tragedy is the news that we are getting at this point. 21 people have been rescued. So out of the 36 that were on the vessel, on board the vessel, 15 Indians have lost their lives. This has been confirmed by the Indian Embassy as well. I'm being joined at this point by my colleague Kabir Naqvi as well. Kabir, you know, this is very tragic. A very popular tourist destination for many Indians. You know, there have been visuals of how airports have been crowded by Indians as well. It just shows how popular Vietnam is, for that matter, for Indian tourists. This is a very unfortunate tragedy that has happened. And of course, this is the monsoon season there as well. It's rough weather in Vietnam, Kabir.
You're absolutely right, Sneha. The seas were rough as well. However, there was no reports at this point in time that, you know, all these seafarers and all the speedboats that were operating in the Phuoc River between these 2 islands that you just mentioned, ferrying the Indian passengers and the Indian tourists, they had stopped. There were a lot of other speedboats that were also doing the rounds in the same waters. Now, the numbers that we have are, you know, this number could very well change in the time to come, but there were 36 people on board that speedboat that capsized, many of them stuck inside. The authorities and the local first responders said that many of them who were rescued were unconscious. 15 tourists, Indian tourists, beg your pardon, have lost their lives. 21 people have been rescued so far. And just to give a sense of how many Indian tourists were on, you know, this boat, there were 32 Indian tourists and 4 crew members. The total on board number of, you know, people was 36. This exactly happened at sea in the Gulf of Thailand. So, you know, just to give a sense, this is not your everyday lake or, you know, just a small pond or waterway that was being traversed. This is, it did not happen particularly on a river per se. This is part of the sea in the Gulf of Thailand. This is near the Hon Me Rut Nogai Island that you just pointed out, about 400 meters from the shore. This is more closer to the Phuoc Island. Many of those who have traveled to Vietnam would understand what we're essentially talking about. Southern Vietnam is the area that we're looking at. And you rightly pointed out, a lot of Indian tourists that, you know, flock these very areas in southern Vietnam. It's one of Vietnam's largest island. You've got, you know, snorkeling that happens there, scuba diving, lots of island hopping, which is why this speedboat was also being used, most probably. But 32 Indian tourists that were on board, 15 have died. Many of the tourists are believed to belong to one large travel group per se. So many of them are from Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, according to the first, you know, information that we're receiving, the initial preliminary information. Meanwhile, what's also important to understand is that the embassy is working, the Indian mission in Vietnam is working in order to provide any kind of information and assistance to the affected families, Sneha. A control room at the Consulate General of India in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, they've been set up particularly. The phones have been ringing. You can understand, you know, the families must be, you know, calling up to inquire about their loved ones. According to the authorities in the Phuoc Special Economic Zone, the speedboat, it was being operated by Ocean Pier Island Company. That's the name of the company that was operating the speedboat. It was ferrying tourists from the island that you just mentioned, Hon Me Rut, to An Thoi port when it essentially capsized. This is about 1 p.m. about 400 meters off the Honme Rut Nagoi, throwing everyone on board. We had frantic, the eyewitnesses and the first responders said that, there were desperate cries for help. It was and still is a frantic race that's happening against time. Several others that are fighting for their lives, and we've already specified here on News9 that within moments, as the boat flipped over, it threw passengers into the rough waters, and as they got trapped inside this overturned vehicle, there were scenes of panic and chaos. The nearby tourist boats, they were the first people to come in, to help at the accident site. You had the border guards, you had the Navy, the Coast Guard, everybody came in, but it was just a little bit too late. 15 Indian tourists' lives have been lost. About 32 Indian passengers were on that ferry. 21 people have been rescued so far, many of them unconscious at this point in time. So still early doors, but it's a tragic development that we're tracking from the Quoc waterways, Neha.
That's right. In fact, Kabir, this is just ironic, but it absolute coincidence for that matter. But it was around this time in 2025 also that there was a boat tragedy. Another boat had capsized. It was again a time of rough weather, rough seas for that matter. The details of that was around 39 people had died in that. It was again a tourist boat, Wonder Sea, that had capsized due to unexpected thunderstorm. It was during rough weathers again, roughly the same time. Again, Kabir, these are also concerns that need to be kept in mind. We, of course, don't know at this point whether there were all the safety precautions that were taken, whether there were life jackets that were worn, whether there was a green signal given for them to take the ferry boat, as it were, to travel from island to island. Also, these are the times when the weather changes very unexpectedly. We don't know what really caused this capsizing for that matter, Kabir, but big concerns at this point. 15 Indians have lost their life. This was just a joy ride. This was meant to be a joy ride that has turned into a complete tragedy. The Indian embassy in Vietnam looking at this very closely, the government of India looking at this very, very closely. Kabir, as you mentioned, there are 2 control rooms that have been set up, including at Ho Chi Minh, to be able for the loved ones to be able to make their calls. Of course, there would be concerns and panic because, as we said, whole lot of Indians really at this point. Visuals are troubling, Kabir. Let's just talk a little bit about the visuals. We have, on one hand, you have the nearby boats that tried reaching the boat that had capsized, too late for that matter. There were some people that were pulled out. There are visuals of people jumping into the water as well. There's also visuals of those who are trying to give the resuscitation to people who have been rescued. We really don't know how much of that would have succeeded in that particular case, but 21 people have been rescued. That, of course, would come as a sense of relief, but 15 Indians have lost their lives. You want to talk something of of the kind of visuals that we are seeing, Kabir?
At this point in time, you see, first and foremost, it's important that when we're talking about a delicate and sensitive, tragic case like this one, we have to be absolutely sure with the kind of visuals that we throw on air. And here at News9, we've corroborated these pictures. We've got these 2, visuals that have come to light of one of the rough seas, and the officials have not, officially blamed the weather, but just like we can see with, how murky and rough the wave action looks like here, Sneha, you can clearly see that the conditions are quite rough in this, Gulf of Thailand. There are large waves. You can also make out that there's a lot of wind movement and wind speed because of which the waves are acting up, and the rescue efforts were clearly hampered by these, choppy waters. To the visuals on the right side of our screens, you can see some jet skis also that are rushing in. You can see, some smaller speed boats that are also coming in. So by the time the Coast Guard, the Navy, or the border guards, any of the local rescue agencies might have made their way to this particular ferry that has capsized, it would have been a little late. You're absolutely right. We still don't know whether everybody was wearing a life jacket, whether all the safety precautions were taken into account or not. We've had to blur some of these visuals also because, bodies are, kept on the shore. They're, not moving per se, and it's still early doors, which is why we took the safety route and, blurred some of these visuals. But we can't clearly assess whether everybody's wearing a life jacket at this point in time or not. And once the boat capsizes, Sneha, whether you're stuck inside the actual frame of the boat would essentially determine whether a life jacket would have helped you or not. And we still don't know the demography of the Indian tourists there. Were there any minors on board? How many were women? How many were senior citizens? That's something that still needs to be taken a look at. You can clearly see that one Coast Guard vessel is, in action to the right side of our screens. It is a major relief. You're right. Major big silver lining that 21 people were rescued, but the authorities over there said not many of them were conscious. Now, it's going to be, important to see whether bad weather played its role. Was there a sudden wave action? Was there overloading on that ferry? Or was it some sort of a mechanical failure due to which the operatives couldn't, bring the ferry or rein the ferry back into control? Was it a navigation error? No official cause on this particular front has been announced. But you see, Vietnam has become one of the fastest growing outbound destinations for Indians. You pointed out to that tragedy that took place last time around in Singapore, Thailand. Some of these cases have happened. Just to refresh the memories and take them down that, unfortunate memory lane, we lost our Assamese singer, a heartthrob of the nation, which again was one of these, water-related incidents, which again highlights that, one should take water safety into account when you're going for family holidays, whether it's a honeymoon trip, whether it's these days you have your corporate incentive tours, you have island hopping tourism that you just spoke about, especially between India and Vietnam. It is raising new questions, reigniting fresh debates about maritime safety, about compliance when you're on these ferries. It's absolutely important to look at that as well. Emergency preparedness, when you're opting for a company, you should look at, its reviews on the internet, on YouTube, on several media platforms, and the tourist vessel regulation. How old is the vessel? These are questions that now people need to, ask. This is not essentially about how this boat sank or, the storm caused the accident. We need to look at the details of the preparedness of what essentially would have gone wrong. Once again, reiterating that the numbers have been put out on, the Indian mission in Vietnam's websites for both these control centers that have been set up at Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. Resuscitation visuals on our screens right now, Sneha. You're absolutely right. It's still early doors. We don't know whether they would have succeeded in that CPR or, post-capsize event resuscitation. Let's hope that we get some good news out of all the 21 people that have been rescued. But, of course, heart goes out to the people who have lost their loved ones, the 15 Indian tourists that we've lost in this capsize accident.
Kabir, thank you so much for joining us. A grim reminder, often whenever we go for travel with our family, we go for a holiday, often you give the life jacket a miss, a skip, and you say, it's okay, it's fine, it won't happen. I think a lot of lessons from around the world which just say that how important life jackets really become to ensure. As I said, we don't know in this particular case whether life jackets were on or not. That's also something that will have to be looked into. Thank you, Kabir, for joining us, and we'll keep our focus on this.